wasn't a single heart attack proven on autopsy anywhere in America before 1912. The first death from heart attack in America proven on autopsy was 1912. 20 years later, it's the number one killer in America. How the hell did that happen? We're eating more meat in the 1800s than we were 1910s, 20s, and 30s when this first came on the market and then became the number one killer in America. So you can't blame it on meat, but you can show a strong association with processed foods, seed oils, and sugars.
Welcome to the Dr. Ashley Show.
Welcome back to the Dr. Ashley Show. I'm Dr. Ashley, and today we are going to be continuing our conversation with Dr. Anthony Chaffee from a few weeks ago, who was sharing all of his insights about nutrition, chronic diseases, and the carnivore diet specifically. So if you missed part 1, you want to make sure that you check it out. During that episode, we discussed the role of toxins in plants, how many modern chronic diseases stem from our diets, and the incredible potential of eating in line with our own biology. Today, in part 2, we're picking up right where we left off, diving even deeper into how the carnivore diet could be the key to reversing many health issues. We talk about hypothyroid and many other issues that so many of us deal with. So let's jump right in as we continue our conversation with Dr. Anthony Chaffee. What about eating more fat with cholesterol? People are so concerned about cholesterol going up. What do you say about that? And what about, I find that, I don't know, maybe it's 20% of the population following this type of diet, they have an increase in LDL. But their other numbers improve, like HDL goes up, total cholesterol goes down, triglycerides go down, but that darn LDL. What do you say to that? What is that, lean mass hyper responders or something like that?
Well, it's also, we've also seen this in fasting. When people fast for a number of days, you see the exact same pattern. HDL goes up, LDL goes up, triglycerides go down. So that's a natural state. Your body's trying to do this on its own. And it's not because we're eating more fat and we're not eating more cholesterol. In fact, studies have shown that dietary cholesterol plays almost no role in our serum cholesterol. And that's been recognized by the American Heart Association and other sorts of things as well. And it's not like they're, big on the meat diet either, but it's something that is recognized now. But when you just don't eat anything, the exact same changes happen. And your LDL will go up, your HDL will go up, triglycerides will come down. So that's what your body's trying to do. And in fact, when you eat carbohydrates, it stops your body from doing that. And you're actually going to make more triglycerides. You're going to be changing your metabolism. So instead of running on your fat stores, you're going to be running on your carbohydrates that you've just eaten and the glycogen stores that you've made from them. And when you switch that metabolic state to where you're running on your fat stores, some people call a fasting state. I don't call that a fasting state. I think that's our primary metabolic state. That's a primary metabolic state of nearly every animal in the world, because carnivores make up 70% of the animal species in the world. They eat fat and protein. They don't take down a bunch of carbs. So they're in ketosis. They've done studies. Lions and wolves are in ketosis. But then, herbivores as well, like I mentioned, the ones that eat fiber, they don't absorb the glucose from the fiber. Their bacteria break that down. They absorb fat and protein. So cows are in ketosis. Gorillas are in ketosis. We should be in ketosis too. That's the natural metabolic state. You eat food, you store it in your fat, and then you run on your fat. That's the natural way of things. That's your energy stores. So when you're running on your fat, you have to transport that fat from your adipose tissue to your liver, turn into glucose, glycogen, and ketones. And how does it get there? Fat is not water soluble. So it has to be transported in special transporting molecules called HDL, LDL. And so those are transport molecules. And when you're running on fat, then you need more of those molecules. That's part of becoming fat adapted. Your body's getting better. This is when people fast longer or they're on a ketogenic diet longer. They start getting better and better and better energy. Part of that is because they're ramping up their cholesterol production, their HDL and LDL production, so that they can physically move energy better. And so now they have more energy available and they feel better. So that's part of it. A friend of mine, Dr. Nick Norwitz, he's a bright kid. He's a PhD biochemistry from Oxford. He's just in his final year in medical school at Harvard. So, he's no dummy. he's part of the lean mass hyper responders studies with Dave Feldman. And he wanted to demonstrate this metabolic pattern that when you just don't eat carbohydrates, this is going to be the natural thing. And so the converse of that is if you add in carbohydrates, well, you should see the opposite, right? And so he did. So he did an Oreo cookie experiment on himself, and he published this, and he said, hey, this is what I'm doing, compare it to statins. And so he just ate a sleeve of Oreo cookies every day, including, on top of this was extra calories. So he was still eating his high-fat ketogenic diet, nearly a carnivore diet, but not quite. And he just added in extra 12 Oreo cookies, which has fat and sugar and all that other stuff and a lot of calories. And so he did that for 2 weeks, and his cholesterol dropped by something like 74%, right? His LDL. And then he had a washout period, let his cholesterol come back up to, nearly 400. And then he went on statins for 6 weeks, and he didn't even get down nearly as low. It only dropped it down like 34%. So that shows that what's going on there. It's a metabolic state change. That's it. And cholesterol is really good for you. Your entire body is made out of cholesterol. Your entire body requires cholesterol. Your brain is largely made out of cholesterol. Your cells are all made out of cholesterol. There's a lipid bilayer that make up the cell membrane. That lipid in that lipid bilayer is cholesterol. Every sex steroid hormone that you have, estrogen, progestogens, testosterone, cortisol, mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, DHEA, pregnenolone, all these things, they're all made, vitamin D, they're all derived from cholesterol. If you don't have enough cholesterol, you don't have enough hormones. If you are eating plant fats, they have plant sterols, which is the plant version of cholesterol. And they're close enough to cholesterol that our body stops making cholesterol. I mean, that's how important cholesterol is. Our body makes it. And so when you have plant sterols, your body thinks, oh, we have enough cholesterol. We don't need all this stuff. And so you don't make enough of it. Your hormones drop. Your vitamin D drops. You're not able to produce it and stimulate it. You can get out in the sun if you want to, but if you don't have enough cholesterol, you're not going to be able to create enough vitamin D. Bile is made out of it. That's why they blame gallstones on people eating fat because, there's all this cholesterol. So all this cholesterol from your diet, and it's just trying to stuff it in and into your bile, and you get these gallstones. Well, that's not true. It actually comes from not eating enough fat, because that's typically who gets gallstones. It's the people that are avoiding fat. So the 4 F's are for the more common demographic that we see gallstones are female, 40s, fertile, fat. And so what is that? It's a woman, middle-aged woman who's had a couple of kids, probably has some extra baby weight, wants to lose it. And as we all know, if you want to lose fat, you have to stop eating fat, right? Wrong. So they stop eating fat. They may lose some weight. They starve themselves. They feel miserable. And then they just go, I'm not even losing all that much weight. And they go back to eating what they were before. And all of a sudden, they get this pain in their right side. And they go to the doctor and they go like, you got gallstones. And it's like, but, how do I get gallstones? Because you've been eating too much fat. No, it's because they haven't been eating fat. Because again, bile is required to absorb fat. And that is so important that you have 5 organs all working in concert just to absorb fat. So you have the stomach starts breaking down the food, the liver makes bile, gallbladder stores it and concentrates it. And that's very important because if you don't get a kill every single day, and it's a week or two between meals, you still need to absorb the same amount of fat. So it concentrates it up to 20 times what it comes out of your liver as, normally physiologically. Some people probably more than that. And that becomes important later. But then also your pancreas makes enzymes that break things down like lipase, and then your small intestine absorbs it. So you have all 5 of those things working together. It's very energy dependent. And that's not going to happen if your body doesn't want fat, because if it didn't want fat, it simply wouldn't absorb it. It doesn't have to. It's working really hard to go out of its way to absorb the fat. And so it's making that bile, it's storing that in the gallbladder, and it's concentrating it. And if you're not eating fat and you're not eating fat and you just continue to do this, then it's getting more and more concentrated. And what happens to any hyper-concentrated solution at rest? It forms precipitate. It forms crystals, as anybody who took high school chemistry can tell you. And so that's what bile sludge is. That's what gallstones are. Even if you had a very severe predilection to develop stones, if you just ate enough fat every day to account for all of the bile that you're making, physically impossible to get gallstones. It's not possible because it won't be there. There won't be any bile to turn into stones in your gallbladder. So it's from not eating fat, from not from too much fat. So cholesterol is used to make bile. It's used to make your hormones. It's used to make every cell in your body. It's used to make your brain. A large portion of your brain is cholesterol. The myelination around your axons, which allow your nerve cells to communicate faster so that your brain works, so that your body works, that myelination is from saturated fat and cholesterol, mostly cholesterol. So, like babies, you have kids. So when they're newborn, they're just little, couple months old, very uncoordinated, can't stall, sort of falling over, trying to grab things, and they're all wobbly and things like that. That's because their nerves aren't myelinated yet. And so it's that myelination that actually gives them that coordination. So I'm giving a signal down to my hand. It's very responsive because it's nearly instantaneous from my brain to my fingers. Whereas in a baby, when it's not myelinated, it takes longer to get that signal there, right? And so when you don't have enough cholesterol or you don't have enough B12, which only exists in meat, you actually get demyelination of your nerves and your axons. You can actually get nerve damage. You can actually get brain damage. And so there are just a plethora of studies in the literature talking about how if you disrupt your normal cholesterol metabolism in your brain, you get very serious neurodevelopmental and neurocognitive issues and diseases. And yet now we're going out of our way to bring about a disruption of our normal cholesterol metabolism in our brain and our body. We take statins, which cross the blood-brain barrier and stop your brain from making cholesterol. They don't just take out excess cholesterol from your blood, which you're not in excess if your body's making it naturally. It stops your body and your brain from making it in the first place. And so if you stop your brain from making cholesterol, you won't have enough cholesterol to build and maintain your brain. And in fact, there are cases in the literature showing that adults who have Alzheimer's and are on statins were taken off the statins, and 6 weeks later, wouldn't you know, they didn't have Alzheimer's.
Wow.
And then they were put back on the statins 6 weeks later, they had Alzheimer's again. Isn't that unlucky? Right? And so this is something that we really need to reevaluate. The evidence against cholesterol and for cholesterol causing heart disease is zero. There has not been a single study of experimental design that has ever shown a cause and effect relationship between either cholesterol, total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, ApoB, anything involved with cholesterol or saturated fat and cardiovascular disease. None. There have been at least 5 randomized controlled trials with thousands of patients that have actually shown the opposite. 3 of them showed that there was no benefit by reducing saturated fat and reducing cholesterol. And 2 of them, the larger, more well-designed studies, one with nearly 10,000 patients, actually showed that as you reduced saturated fat and reduced cholesterol and LDL cholesterol, more people died of heart attacks and strokes as a result. And that was done in the late 60s from 68 to 73. It was called the Minnesota Coronary Experiment. And the reason that wasn't taught to any of us in medical school or nursing school or anything else is because they buried it for 40 years. And it wasn't until 2014 that Dr. Ramsden from the NIH actually found whispers of this and found that this study had been done and contacted one of the lead researchers' children who were around, and they were doctors, and they found their dad's old stuff and found all the data from this study back in the 60s and 70s. Interestingly enough, one of the other lead researchers on, and then they published it in 2014 in Nature, top medical journal or top journal. And one of the lead researchers back in the 60s and 70s happened to be the guy who famously publicized the cholesterol heart hypothesis, which is Ansel Keys. He got on the cover of Time magazine, and he was notorious for trying to destroy the reputations and careers of anybody who said anything against his theory. And he did. This was a battle for decades. If you go back into the literature and JAMA, New England Journal of Medicine, all these other top journals at the time, you go in the 50s and 60s, it is hotly contested. There are papers. This is based on no scientific evidence. This is really weak evidence. We shouldn't be accepting this. And then you have Ansel Keys, who was on the payroll from the sugar companies. That is a known fact that he was on the payroll from the sugar companies. He was pushing the other side. And because there were researchers saying that, hey, we think sugar is causing heart disease, which is a brand new disease. There wasn't a single heart attack proven on autopsy anywhere in America before 1912. The first death from heart attack in America proven on autopsy was 1912. 20 years later, it's the number one killer in America. How the hell did that happen? We're eating more meat in the 1800s than we were 1910s, 20s, and 30s when this first came on the market and then became the number one killer in America. So you can't blame it on meat, but you can show a strong association with processed foods, seed oils, and sugars. And so Ansel Keys was being paid by the processed food companies and sugar companies to basically put out counter op sort of work, which is what the tobacco companies did for decades. And it's the same sort of tactic. You try to just pump out garbage research and you just muddy the waters. Oh, we have 10 studies that say yes and 10 studies that say no. Ooh, I guess we need more studies. And in the meantime, I keep getting to sell you poison. So Ansel Keys was part of that Minnesota coronary experiment. Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor at Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys. They buried it. It didn't have the result that they wanted. And one of the authors was actually interviewed before he died and said, hey, why did this not get published? And he had a moment of honesty. He just said, well, there's nothing, was there something wrong with the design? Was it a bad study? Like, no, the study was good. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that we were just really disappointed with the results. You can't do that, right? So Ansel Keys was part of it. They ended up taking him off. They published an abstract back in the 80s, but they took him off of that. But he was one of the lead researchers on that. And then surprise, surprise, they bury this thing. And then he keeps pushing for the rest of his career. Cholesterol's bad, lower cholesterol, go on the Mediterranean diet, eat a lot of plants and sugar's fine. And they even said that. Don't eat fat. What do you replace it with? Replace it with sugar. It's healthy. It's fine. It's empty calorie, but you need those calories. Calories are important. Get them from sugar. It's just a con. And so there is not a single shred of experimental evidence showing a cause and effect relationship between cholesterol and heart disease, or saturated fat and cholesterol, or saturated fat and heart disease. Here's another one. This is really important. Everyone vilifies saturated fat. It is not the problem. It's actually really beneficial. So Journal of American College of Cardiology and others have put massive meta-analyses and systematic reviews and umbrella studies. So if you have really good studies, really good randomized control trials, you make a meta-analysis of that, that's really top shelf evidence. Like, wow, we've got 40 good quality randomized control trials. So not junk in, junk out. It's high quality. So you get high quality out and you're getting this amazing meta-analysis. But then you have other people doing other meta-analyses of other top randomized controlled trials. And then you make a meta-analysis of those meta-analyses. That's called an umbrella review. So that is really the tip of the pyramid there. And so they have done umbrella reviews of high-level studies, high-level meta-analyses, and high-level randomized controlled trials, looking at the relationship between saturated fat and cardiovascular disease. And you know what they found? Absolutely no relationship whatsoever between increased saturated fat consumption and cardiovascular disease. In fact, they found an inverse relationship between saturated fat and strokes. So people that ate more saturated fat had less strokes. Less saturated fat, more strokes. And so the conclusion from these authors was like, there should be no arbitrary upper limit set on the consumption of saturated fat. It is safe at every level tested. So this is a con, and it's a con that has cost billions of people their health and probably hundreds of millions to billions of people their life, and died early and prematurely. And it is something that we desperately have to turn around.
Hey there, need extra support staying hydrated while shedding pounds and maintaining weight loss? Introducing Dr. Ashley's Electrolyte Plus, which I created just for this purpose. Packed with evidence-backed ingredients like vitamin D, C, and zinc for immune support, B vitamins for energy, and a blend of full spectrum electrolytes and minerals to hydrate, stabilize glucose levels, and curb cravings. Visit drashleywellness.com and use code ASHLEY10 for 10% off your first purchase or 20% off your first subscription order with free shipping. Plus, enjoy a 30-day money-back guarantee. Back to the show.
What do you say about cultures who don't eat a lot of fat and do eat more carbs? Like people will say, well, Japanese people are really healthy, or people in France who eat a lot of pasta. Their saturated fat intake is lower, maybe in Japan, probably. What do you say about that?
Well, interestingly, France is actually a very high saturated fat content. So Ansel Keys got famous because he did something called the 7 Nations study. And that's not an experimental study, that's observational. So it could only generate a hypothesis. It can't show a cause and effect relationship. And you took 7 nations and say, look, the more saturated fat and cholesterol, you have this upward sloping curve, this exponential growth curve showing that there's more heart disease and heart attacks, right? But he had complete data for 22 countries. One of them was France, which actually broke that graph because they had very high saturated fat and very low cardiovascular disease. And so it's actually, if you plot all those, it's actually just a scattering across the board. Interestingly enough, also, he was defending the sugar companies on the pay of the sugar companies, but in his data, just for those 7 nations, he had the exact same correlation between sugar consumption and heart disease as he found with fat and cholesterol and heart disease for those 7 nations. And then if you look at all the nations, there's no correlation at all between fat, cholesterol, and heart disease, but there is a strong correlation with sugar and heart disease. And so that's interesting too. So he's just a fraud all the way around. But yes, you can be relatively more or less healthy. If you are eating less junk food, you're eating less sugar, eating less high octane garbage, you are going to be relatively better. But does that mean that people in Japan who eat a clean, traditional Japanese diet are as healthy as they possibly could be? Or are they just relatively better than people eating a junk food garbage diet? I think it's a relative improvement as opposed to an absolute improvement. But, people in Okinawa, they say these are part of the blue zones. They say, oh, they're just eating a bunch of yams. No, actually, they eat a ton of pork and fish. They actually have a very high meat diet. And so they actually do eat a lot of meat. But there are places like, to use your example, that eat more plant-based. They eat far less saturated fat and much less meat in general, like India. You have an entire subcontinent of India is 1.4 billion people, so a big population sample. And the interesting thing about them is they have a pretty similar diet. The standard Indian diet is vegetarian.
They have a lot of diabetes, don't they?
They have some of the highest diabetes rates in the world, some of the highest metabolic syndrome rates in the world. They have over 33% of their population that has been tested. And a lot of people live rurally, they're very poor, they don't have access to medicine. 33% of the people tested had metabolic syndrome, and 25% in urban and rural areas had diabetes, right? So in America, we're all fat, sick, McDonald's everywhere. Like, oh, these terrible, horrible Americans, the worst of the worst. Wrong. Americans are 9% diabetic. India, plant-based India, that only eats 3 kilos of meat per person per year on average, 25% diabetes rates, and heart disease is out of control there. 1 in 4 people from India will die of a heart attack. 1 in 3 men from India will die of a heart attack. So if we want to look at plant-based versus meat, why don't we look at India, 1.4 billion examples, and then we can look at Hong Kong that eats the most meat per person per year and has the highest life expectancy on earth. India has one of the lower ones. It's like 66 years. And Hong Kong is in the upper 70s, right? And they eat more meat. And there was a study out of, I think it's University of Adelaide in Australia a couple of years ago. They looked at 175 different countries. They looked at all these different sorts of metrics. And they found that in all 175 countries, when corrected for socioeconomic sort of standards and all these other sorts of confounding factors, that in every single country, all 175, that the higher meat consumption equated directly with an increased correlation in longevity and health. So more meat equals longer life and better health. And we see traditional populations like the Maasai, you talk to them, and I've had friends do research trips out there, and they would say when people die of old age, they're not getting killed by a lion or something. They don't die from heart disease and cancers and diabetes and things like that. Cancer is just really not known in those communities when living naturally. They live to be 90, 100, or over 100 very readily, and they're out active adults, with their herds and migratorial. They have to keep moving all the time. So you have 100-year-old people walking with a pack on their back, right? Very healthy people into late age, but they have a lower average life expectancy from birth because infant mortality rate is a lot higher when you're living out in the bush and you're dealing with lions and malaria and things like that.
Yeah.
But the age that people live to when they die of old age is far higher than what we're seeing in Western countries. And we saw that with the Native Americans as well. They had records of them living to be 110, 120, sometimes as old as 137 years old, with Chief John Smith White Wolf, who died in the 1920s. And for decades, they were saying how old he was, and his family was saying how old he was. And people were like, wow, that's pretty old. And he just kept going and kept going and kept going. And so people look back retrospectively and say, well, that's probably garbage because of X, Y, and Z. Well, you can say that, but there's no hard evidence one way or the other. We don't have a birth certificate on him because they didn't have birth certificates where he was living and when he was born. But we only have their records, and they say that he was, 137. And also, he describes in multiple different accounts and multiple different times his experiences fighting in the War of 1812, right? So if you're an adult and you fight in the War of 1812 and you die in the 1920s, you're pretty damn old. And it sounds far-fetched, but we now know as geneticists, what I was taught in genetics class 24 years ago is that humans actually are genetically designed to live 120 years on average based on the length of our telomeres. So if they're just lying and they're just making things up, it's very interesting that they're all saying they just make it around that 110, 120, 130 year mark, which is an average 120. Herodotus, you go back in history. Herodotus was the first historian from ancient Greece, and he chronicled an interaction between the Persians and the Ethiopian king. So a diplomat from Persia came over and was talking to the Ethiopian king. The king asked them, what do your people eat and how long do your people normally live? And he described growing wheat and making bread and said that their people would live, typically around 70 years. Pretty similar to what we do now and pretty similar to what we eat now. And the Ethiopian king, sort of laughed at him and said, well, no wonder you live such short lives if all you eat is dirt, because we only eat boiled meat from our cattle and we only drink milk and water. And our people would live 120 years, sometimes much longer. And so there's that number again, 120. And why is that? Because that's actually how long we're supposed to live if we just stay out of our own way. So an average life expectancy genetically means that if you just stay out of your own way and don't mess up, you should make it to 120 without doing anything special. You don't have to do biohacking or this and cold plunges and, red light therapy. You just live your life. And as long as you don't mess up, you should make it to 120. So why are we dying in our 60s and 70s? Why are we saying someone who's 85 and they die from all these chronic diseases that, wow, they had a good life? They died 40 years early. And so I think that's an actual catastrophe. So that's, again, going back to the poisons that are in plants. Well, you can't say that spinach is poisonous. I eat spinach salad all the time. People smoke all the time too. They drink all the time too. They do heroin all the time too. Doesn't kill you right away unless you have an acute, overload. But over the days, over the months, over the years, over the decades, this poison builds up and breaks down your system. And you get COPD, you get heart disease, you get cancer. And we know these are known consequences of poisoning yourself with cigarettes and alcohol. And yet for some reason, we get these same diseases from eating bread and potato chips and even Brussels sprouts. And yet we wonder what the hell is going on. It couldn't possibly be. It's the same thing. You're damaging yourself slowly over time. And slow poison is still poison. And if you died half a century early, you were killed by poison. And that's all there is to it.
Thanks, Dr. Chaffee.
Welcome.
So much. I really appreciate everything. I have one more question, though. And I know I need to let you go, but I can't let you go before this one.
That's fine.
Okay, it can be a short answer. But a lot of people say that eating ketogenic, low carb tanks your thyroid. I hear that all the time. What do you say to that? Just no?
Well, no, yeah, it's a hard no. The thing is that, well, Professor Steve Finney out of UC Davis, who's been studying ketogenic diets for decades, has actually shown that you simply don't need as much thyroid hormone when you're in a state of ketosis, because your body's working better, your metabolism is working better. And that's what your thyroid hormone has to do, plays in with your metabolism, and things just are running more efficiently. You just don't need as much. And that's fine too. What I actually see in my clinical practice, because it's so common now, hypothyroidism and thyroid dysfunction is so common now. And so most patients who come into me fresh will have some sort of thyroid dysfunction.
Yeah.
And every single one, when they go, when I can convince them, which I actually have a pretty good and very motivated patient population, so they're very willing to hear me out and to try something. So most of them do try a ketogenic carnivore diet, and they all improve. And you have to ask why. Okay, why are people having thyroid dysfunction? Okay, well, it could be low iodine, malnutrition, right? It could be some of these, different toxins. There's a whole class of plant toxins called goitrogens, which cause goiters. Goiter is an enlarged thyroid because it doesn't work properly. And so you have these poisons that stuff up the functionality of your thyroid and make it not work as well. And you get hypothyroidism, or you keep bringing these plant toxins and lectins, and your body doesn't like those, and your body attacks them with antibodies, and those antibodies get cross reaction with your thyroid. You call that Hashimoto's. So it depends on what's causing it. But again, it all comes down to toxicities and malnutrition. Toxicities, you have goitrogens. This is a known classification. You can Google it. It's fine. It has a Wikipedia page, I'm sure. People can look up goitrogens. And these things cause thyroid dysfunction and goiter. So this is toxicity, right? And then not enough iodine, malnutrition. And then also the autoimmune side of things, which is also part of toxicity, because you're getting an immune reaction to these toxins. So it all comes down again to toxicity and malnutrition. You get rid of those toxins, you improve your nutrition, most problems go away. And so when I see people go on a high-fat, meat-based, ketogenic diet, carnivore diet, if I push that for my patients, their thyroid improves. Hashimoto's goes away. And Hashimoto's is very underdiagnosed. And that's the thing. You need to find out why you have low thyroid. And most doctors traditionally trained won't test for Hashimoto's until your TSH goes above 10. But above 2 doubles your risk of developing thyroid cancer. So that's not a good place to be. So you want to be at 6, 7, 8, 9. We'll just wait. What are you waiting for? There is a problem. Find out what it is. Stop it before it becomes a disaster. But they wait for the wheels to fall off before they do anything about it. So no, when the check engine light comes on, you start hearing a weird rattling noise in the engine. That's when you go, right? You don't just wait till the whole thing blows up, right?
Same if you have pre-diabetes, you need to do something about it, then not wait until it becomes full blown.
That's it. Or even if you have perfectly normal blood sugar and you have insulin resistance, because you can have elevated insulin for 10, 15 years before you ever get prediabetes. You need to do something then, because that elevated insulin is now disrupting over 100 different mechanisms in your body. You need that insulin back down. And so you're getting all sorts of metabolic distress just from the insulin, even before you get to the prediabetes. Then the prediabetes comes, and the heightened blood sugar directly damages your body. It's actually the blood sugar that kills diabetics, damages the body. The glucose molecules physically fuse to other molecules called glycation, and it permanently damages them. It causes AGEs, advanced glycation end products. And so those build up and the body breaks down. And so this is why you lose your toes, you get your feet amputated, then your legs, and your kidneys start to fail. You go on dialysis, then you have to get a kidney transplant, get heart disease, you get diabetic retinopathy, you go blind. Alzheimer's now being called type 3 diabetes because of insulin resistance of the brain. We see this on PET scans, that there's reduced glucose uptake in the brain in people that are suffering from Alzheimer's. And then you die. And it's just a relief that someone dies after all of that. It all comes from just mildly elevated blood sugar. Just that blood sugar is toxic to the body above a certain level. And so your body's desperately trying to keep it down below by ramping up your insulin. When you have a fire at your house, you're not complaining to the fire department for spraying it with water and causing water damage. You're like, oh, just thank God the fire's out. That's what insulin's doing. And so you're just desperately trying to put out this fire so you don't die, the fire of high blood sugar. So you're getting damage from the insulin, but at least it's not burning the whole house down. But it does cause a lot of damage over time. If you keep restarting fires and keep getting water damage and fires and water damage and fires and water damage, like your house is going to be screwed very quickly. And that's what's happening to our bodies when we're messing around with blood sugar and insulin. But yeah, and so you don't wait for these things. I have, just to touch on the thyroid thing, I have probably over 100 patients with Hashimoto's specifically, and I can track their antibodies. And when they just go on a pure meat and water diet, especially like a ruminant animal diet, like red meat and water, beef and lamb and water, those antibodies just come right down. It can take months. It can take even over a year, depending on how high their antibodies are. But as long as they're strict, those antibodies come right down to nothing, and then they become untraceable. And it's like they don't have an autoimmune issue anymore. And if you're not making antibodies towards yourself, you really don't have it to speak of. It's like lead poisoning, and you get the lead out. Well, you don't have lead poisoning anymore. Well, but what happens when you eat lead again? Yeah, you get lead poisoning again, because it's not a disease. It's a toxicity. And when you reintroduce these things, your body makes antibodies towards them. Yeah, you're going to get a problem again. But that doesn't mean that it's always there and you can never cure it, because it's not a cure situation. It's a toxicity situation. So you're removing all these toxins, you're improving your nutrition, you're going to improve your thyroid function there, you're removing causes of autoimmunity. Invariably, I see my patients, and I have hundreds of patients on a carnivore diet, their thyroid improves. I've never seen thyroid dysfunction on a carnivore diet. Hey guys, thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to what I had to say. If you like it, then please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and podcast. And if you're on YouTube, then please hit that little bell and subscribe, and that'll let you know anytime I have a new video out, which should be every week, if not more. And if you could share this with your friends, that would help me get the word out and let me know that you like what I'm doing. Thanks again, guys.